I'll just use this picture for reference. Look at his face. They're kind of like, you know, the like, let's all go to the lobby people who are like singing in front of the movie theater. That's like the design of the characters in this movie. It's really cute. So I'm gonna be trying to talk and draw at the same time, so this is going to be a little bit experimental. Normally, when I try to talk and draw at the same time, I can only focus on one of the two things. Anyway, this is something I thought I'd maybe try, is basically giving my thoughts on a film or a show or something animated that I feel like interested in talking about or discussing. And I figured the perfect thing to start with would be Sausage Party, considering I'm really interested in adult animation. It's probably something that's I personally like more than children animation. And it's not to say that I don't love children's animation, but I really love the freedom and the risks and the adult animation just seems to have a lot less restricting the content and what they can say, so it just I tend to gravitate towards it a little bit more. I like darker stories. I like stories that can kind of show more human kinds of things, and not to say that children's animation can't do that, but for me personally, I tend to like adult animated things a great deal. I'm also not easily offended by content. So for those of you who don't know, Sausage Party is an adult animated film. It is the first ever widely released CG animated R-rated film. There have been a lot of R-rated animated films in the past, but this is the first one that's CG. It's created by very mainstream comedians. It was very widely advertised, so I dare to say this is probably the most like mainstream R-rated animated film, which I like. I think it's about time that we got R-rated animation, and considering that this film did decently well, I think their chances are pretty high that they'll make more. The offensive humor in this film, it never felt mean-spirited to me. I watch a lot of R-rated animation. I've seen all of Family Guy, I've seen all of South Park, I've seen all of Drawn Together even, and Drawn Together I think is to date the most offensive animated thing I've ever seen. I think the only R-rated animation that I actively dislike is the Ren and Stimpy adult party cartoon. That to me is like the apex of like shock value that has absolutely no reason to exist and is just painfully unpleasant to witness. It's not funny, it's not even really well done, it's just complete utter garbage. With Sausage Party, I don't even think it reaches that particular level. Like, I definitely could see where people would feel it did, especially people whose sense of humor isn't like this, because there are a great deal of things about the movie that are kind of controversial. There's the fact that all the foods and a lot of the humor comes from stereotypes. You know, like the food is all representative of kinds of people and kinds of culture, so it's kind of big stereotypy mess when it comes to, like, you know, what countries are represented in what foods and stuff. But the reason that didn't bother me is, like, one, everybody in the entire world, everybody in existence is equally made fun of in this, and to me that's always the thing that kind of like makes everything go full circle. Like, it's so offensive that it's not really offensive anymore. It's just utterly stupid. The tone of the movie is never like, oh, these people are bad, these people do this is bad. It was more so everything is so over the top and so stupid that, like, it's really hard to be offended by it. Like, it's not like being mean about these stereotypes. It just kind of has them. Like, it's it. And they actually weirdly serve a purpose within the setting of this world. So, for those of you guys who don't know, the movie is about a supermarket through the eyes of food. And it's like all the food that exists in the supermarket all have their own belief systems depending on, you know, where they are, what aisle. They all believe in a different afterlife, whether they get chosen
by the humans to go to what they call the Great Beyond, which is essentially, it's like heaven. They all have a different version of what they think that heaven will be, and they all have kind of restrictions upon themselves. They can't give in to whatever temptations they have because they think that that is what they are meant for when they get chosen by the humans and get taken out. And what they don't know is, obviously, when they get taken out, they're viciously destroyed and eaten. So it's kind of this weirdly existential, allegorical movie about belief and religion. It kind of pokes a little bit at how these kinds of things can be misled or how they can cause differences amongst people. And I think that is the main reason that they do the stereotyping the way they do it. And that's maybe why, in the greater scheme of the plot of the movie, I wasn't really offended by it, because like it's really meant to very kind of broadly attack these subjects and represent people. So it made sense to me that the people were kind of very broad stereotypes of the kinds of people in the world. To me, it made sense because the statements they were making were very broad. And again, they made everyone a stereotype. It wasn't just like people from different countries, it was just everyone. It was types of people, it was types of objects, it was just everything. So to me, in a weird way, it served a better purpose to the actual plot of the movie than I would have expected. A lot of the humor was very like, oh, if you're stoned, like, this will be hilarious, or, oh, you know, if you're into like really dumb, simple juvenile humor, like, there's a lot of that. But there was also a lot of like meta humor. There was a lot of like subtle like humor. There was a lot of like varied humor, and then there was a lot of very strictly visual humor, very like extreme cartoony action. The animation was absolutely amazing. Like the budget for this movie was only like $20 million, which for animation is insanely low. And the animation was honestly very good for that budget. It was impressive how well rendered they managed to make everything. So this movie is getting a lot of buzz now because a lot of animators have come out talking about their experiences working on this film, and this is something that not a lot of people would probably hear about. I think it's really big in the animator and the artist circuit right now, but it's not really something that I think most people seeing the movie would know about. And it's basically that like at least half the animators who worked on this film were not credited, and a lot of them quit because they were being expected to work overtime for no money. It's just this really huge thing. You know, a lot of artists are really outraged about it. I mean, I'm honestly really like disgusted by it too. Like, this is not, like, that is not a fair way to treat animators. It's not a fair way to treat artists in general. This is this particular company's first film. So I think, you know, a lot of it had to do with this, you know, they had the small budget, they had to use it accordingly, but apparently a lot of the money went to, you know, forces that were not the animators, and the animators were kind of expected to do all this work for free, and they weren't credited, and I'm like, to me, that's ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous that these people put in such hard work and such amazing work on this movie, and they actually really cared about it. They, you know, they put a lot of heart and soul into it, and I can't even imagine doing that and not being credited. I guess my only thing is that this actually does happen in animation. It's happened in the past. I don't think it's ever happened to this particular extent, at least as far as I know, but you know, a lot of studios will do anything it takes to cut corners, even the studios that have a shit ton of money and can afford it. It's just how the industry works. But, you know, with animated films, they're much more focused on making the money and saving the money. This film was a liability. This film is not, you know, it's not a Pixar movie. It's not even like a run-of-the-mill animated film. It's the first ever R film. It has a ton riding on it. It could have been the biggest flop, waste of money ever, and it probably would have ruined the studio that's just trying to start off. So they were probably just really freaking out about like how much this movie could tank, and they wanted it to be as good as they possibly could for like as cheap as they possibly could. At least that's what I think in terms of like why this happened on this particular film. But that doesn't really excuse it. That doesn't really, you know, make it right. And I honestly really do hurt for those animators because like they did an amazing job on this movie. This movie is gorgeous. This movie has amazing acting. It has really fun visual timing. Like that was something that really impressed me when I first started seeing the trailers and the clips. You know, I got genuinely stoked for this movie. Like this will likely have spoilers, just considering like I'm kind of stream of consciously talking about this film. Okay, so I was one of the people when it was going around before this movie came out during the Sony leak. A rough draft script for this movie was leaked, and there was a few days where everybody on Tumblr, everybody on Twitter, everyone was just going apeshit because they were all reading the script, and the script had this ridiculous shit in it, including a like description of the orgy scene at the end, and everybody was freaking out because they were like, oh my god, this movie is trash, it's full of racial humor, it's full of violence and weed and, you know, all the trademark stuff that you'd expect. I think I was the only one who reading this thing like caught the like allegorical like deeper meaning stuff. Like I think I was the only one because I like read it and I went to like my friends and stuff and I was like, hey, you know, this movie, it's stupid and it's vulgar and it's got some cringy jokes in here, but like it's kind of like weirdly dark, like dark in the sense of like, you know, you'll like feel weird about it. And in the original, in the script, it ends very differently than the actual film. So I was actually very impressed with how they handled some of the stuff, because there was some stuff in that script that I was really expecting to cringe in my seat while some of the stuff played. The villain character was very, very different. I didn't dislike it, but I definitely feel like the way they ended up going with the villain character, which is like a literal douche. I felt like the way they portrayed him as like a dude bro, just an extreme, you know, kind of douche figuratively. Like I feel like that was much stronger because the original villain, they actually kind of treated him a little bit more like a victim, and he was a little bit more flamboyant, let's say. And I just felt like that was a little bit strange. So I'm really happy that they changed that aspect of the movie. And that actually changed an entire portion of the movie based on the script. So the script really changed from what I read, but I was very happy that what I took away from the script, which was that this movie had a lot more to say, and it had a message that I actually could kind of relate to and appreciate. I was incredibly happy to see that they kept that in the final film, and that they got rid of all the stuff in the script that I felt was a little bit over the line. And it was nice seeing that it wasn't like, you know, the same thing that I'd already read. But there were some lines, especially near the beginning, like especially in the first half, there were some lines that did not change. Like they were the exact same lines as in that script that was leaked. So that was kind of weird to see. Then again, like they weren't nearly as cringy in the actual film because the delivery is a huge part of humor. There was one line on paper, it looked so stupid. It didn't look stupid, but like, you know, it was a cliche kind of like derpy line. It was one of the human characters who works in the store just goes, "I fucking hate my job." And that, the way it was animated and the way it was performed was one of the funniest parts in the entire movie. Just that one line. And I think that shows a lot, not only of the merit to the animators, but it also is just how different something can be in performance over being written. So, you know, people reading the script now and judging the script, I don't really think that that's fair, because a lot of the humor comes in the performance. And I think it's very unfair of people to kind of write it off after reading the script, because it's like, yeah, the script is vulgar and it's got these really stupid, cringy lines, but in actual practice, some of them land a lot better than they would on paper. Honestly, like, the animation was really fun to watch. Like, I mean, again, like, I mentioned that scene, and seeing it, you'll understand why I feel like that was such an effective scene. It just got everybody to laugh, and it was entirely the animators. The animators sold this movie. Without the animation that it has, this movie would not be nearly as good. It would not be nearly as charming in a weird way. I felt this movie was very charming. I felt it had this kind of, I mean, like, it came about because Seth Rogen wanted to kind of satirize Pixar and, you know, the kind of movies that they make. And it really hits that. It hits this, like, really warm feeling, like, charming, cutesy, animated characters. And that's why it's so funny seeing them do really terrible things. Like, the climax of this movie, it goes from being, like, a casual, you know, mainstream rated R movie to, like, one of the most, like, vulgar animated things ever to be made within the span of, like, 10 minutes. And it just doesn't let up. And that's what makes it so great. Because you just, like, everything that you had watched up until that point in the movie had been leading up to that scene that is so infamous. And when that scene hits, you don't know, like, what to do with yourself. You don't know what you're watching. And it goes so fast. Like, that's another thing. Everybody is very, you know, it's very, oh my god, it's so disgusting. It goes way too fast for you to really register anything. And I think that that is really genius. Because I think if they, like, really took their time to, like, show you what was happening, it wouldn't be funny. It would just be, like, a really creepy person's porn. But the fact that it just goes and goes and it switches shots so fast and you have no idea what's going on, that was how it was able to achieve this kind of humor. Part of the fun is seeing the reaction and being with people. Like, I honestly would recommend seeing this movie with somebody. If you know somebody who, like, isn't easily offended, then honestly go with them to this movie. Because it is just as funny, like, seeing reactions from people as it is, like, actually reacting yourself. There's a charm in seeing a movie where everybody is laughing and everybody is, like, reacting. It was very fun seeing, like, the different scenes that got a really big reaction out of, like, different people in the theater. Honestly, when I left this movie, I was in the best mood. I don't know what kind of spell it casts, because, like, unlike most R-rated comedies, this one's animated, so it's got that, like, cartoony, bright, expressive feel, but it's got humor that will just make you explode with laughter. And I think that that's, like, wonderful. I think that that's really unique, and I think that that's something that, like, I definitely want more of. I would love more of this movie. I think this movie works especially well because the characters aren't human, so the sexual stuff, it isn't as, like, uncomfortable. This movie's definitely not for everybody. Probably not everybody will like the message that they give. The message is kind of, it's not against religion, but it's very, you know, it has a kind of cautionary tale feel to it about, like, structured belief systems. And what I did like, though, was this movie had a lot of respect for that kind of thing as well. Its main message ended up being something that I really, really appreciated, which is, you know, don't let these differences of, like, what you think, you know, the afterlife will be, or, you know, whatever you believe in, don't, you know, don't feel bad in believing it if it makes you happy, but don't put it on somebody else, and don't, like, use it as justification to harm somebody else. And that is, like, honestly a message that really resonated with me. And, you know, you could say that they did it well, you could say that they did it not so well. I personally feel like they did it well, but I could definitely see where people could feel it was kind of preachy. I could see where people could be off-putted by that. I could see where people of religious, you know, background could only see it as an attack on that and could take a lot of offense to it. But for me personally, I really got the feeling that it was being, it was kind of trying to tell you, hey, believe in something that makes you happy, but also don't, like, let it run you, and don't let it, like, give you justification for, like, harming anyone else, or seeing anyone else as different. Because the film does definitely focus on the idea that everybody, you know, is different. It's got a song written by Alan Menken. He's done, like, the music for The Little Mermaid and Aladdin. He does the opening song in this movie, and I think that's kind of great. Like, I love musicals, so anytime that musicals are used in any kind of animated film, I get excited, but especially something like this. It was very enjoyable to, like, see a really brightly colored number with really nice pacing and really nice acting and performance, and have it be this kind of, like, raunchy song. You know, I recommend it. I definitely recommend this movie, and you know, it's one of those movies that it is going to be part of history, as much as people don't like that. You know, a lot of people can't really see this movie past what it appears to be, and that kind of saddens me, because, you know, writing things off is a very, like, easy thing to do, but it's also very unfair. We need more animation to show Western audiences that it's not just for kids, and it can be a wonderful medium to tell different stories and to tell different kinds of humor. Like, it really can. It's a completely untapped world, and it would be really foolish not to try and do more things with animation. I guess the problem is animation is just so expensive. They tend to really try to push for the only audience they think will buy it in mass, which is usually children. They don't think that adults will pay money to come see these movies, but and because of that, we might be getting stuff like Sausage Party for a while. It might take a while before a really profound film can be made, or, you know, something more deep and something that doesn't rely on shock, and it just happens to have a darker storyline, you know. But for what it's worth, I think Sausage Party does have much more of a message than most people would want to give it credit for. It's not the brainless, vapid movie that people thought it was going to be. It definitely has that in it. It definitely, you know, is partially that, but it is not entirely that. And I think that is the best that we could have hoped for with this film. Like, I really think that is, like, the best possible outcome, and I'm very happy to see that people enjoy it. I'm very annoyed seeing people, like, bitch about the fact that this movie has a high rating when Suicide Squad and Ghostbusters, of all things, like, didn't. And it's just like, well, you know, guys, those movies were, like, the same old thing that we'd seen a million times, and they weren't strong, and they were, you know, very clunky in terms of their setup. You know, they had a ton of mistakes that were very easily sought out, and the public didn't really enjoy. And I saw both those movies, and I can concur with that. They were very just kind of the same old. And Sausage Party, as stupid as it is, it has a much more cohesive plot. It has a much more, like, fresh take on things, and it also has, like, a message to tell. And it's simple enough that it doesn't really get too muddled. So, you know, this movie, there's a reason that critics like this movie. It's actually a well-composed, like, cohesive film, whereas all those other films that they want to, like, compare it to for absolutely no reason are not that way. They have a lot more flaws, and they are a lot more generic than this film. This film is not generic at all. This film does things that no other film has, and I think that that's wonderful. So, you know, I really love Sausage Party. I think this movie is a blast to watch visually. I think it's very funny. I laughed a great deal. I don't think it's a laugh riot. I don't think, like, every 5 seconds there's a joke that, like, will make you laugh. There are jokes every 5 seconds, but I think by the time a joke happens that isn't funny, another one is coming that will make you laugh in, like, not that long a time. And when it's not making you laugh, it's at least visually really fun to watch. It's not like most R-rated comedies that, you know, it's live action, so when it's not a joke, you don't really have a whole lot to keep you really like interested. And that could just be because I'm an animator, so I'm like, you know, I'm staring at the screen, I'm watching even the blinks of the characters. I'm like, it's so like well timed. I was stoked to see this movie ever since I read the script. I knew what was gonna be in it. I was so ready. I was so ready for people to just be in awe. Like, especially the people who had no idea, like, that the orgy scene was there. Like, people just coming in completely fresh and having no clue. I was so ready for that. And it didn't disappoint. In fact, it was a lot better than I expected it to be. I expected it to be a lot more cringy based on script. But again, like, even those jokes that I felt were really lacking in the script, like, they completely shined in the film. It's certainly got its flaws. It's certainly not for everybody. But for what it is, it's a lot better than what people who have not seen the movie are giving it credit for. It's definitely not, like, the best movie ever made, of course. It's not the best animated movie ever made, but in terms of, like, adult animated projects, and I've seen a great deal, it's definitely one of the best adult animated films ever made, in my opinion. And I really love adult animation. It could offend people, and it could make people think, though. It could change people's perception of something. You know, even just in a little way. Like, even if they don't realize it, it could change how somebody thinks about something. And, you know, it probably won't, because it's a completely wreck of a film. In terms of, like, the content, you know, it's all over the place, but, you know, it's just, you know, it's not something that is brainless. It makes you think, and I like that. I think that's really, like, special. This video probably isn't as cohesive, you know, as it would be if I, like, wrote out a script and, you know, really, like, organized my feelings about the film and did, like, a more structured review type thing. I'm just not really that kind of person. I like to talk and I like to ramble. I truly think that this movie is good. I think this is a good movie. I think it's structurally fine. I think its story is interesting. I think its moral is, like, something that is very relevant in this day and age, and I personally really love it because it's something kind of close to my heart. Is, you know, religious intolerance and respecting people's beliefs. That's something that I very much care about. So it's very, you know, it's very, you know, I don't think anybody expected it to be that kind of profound with its message. You know, whether it succeeds in, you know, making people reflect on themselves, I don't know, because it is still a very, you know, raunchy comedy, and a lot of its humor is very childish, but if people can get past that, it does have, you know, something that people can take away. And I definitely recommend Sausage Party. If you, you know, if you can handle things without getting offended. If you can not take things to heart when they're clearly not, like, meant to do you harm. When they're clearly just meant to tell a story and a message. Not to, you know, call you stupid or say you're wrong or say you're terrible. Like, it's not trying to do any of that. It's just trying to make you laugh. Thank you so much for watching this. I'm happy if I could, like, interest anybody in this movie, because I think that this movie is, you know, I think it's something special, and, you know, I'm glad that people are enjoying it for what it is, and I really hope that this leads to more adult animated film. So, thank you for watching.